Legend has it that once our world was whole. Our people were one. Our society was united. But then the fires came.
Lair's setting is a world in chaos, and the chaos is coming from a climate catastrophe where basically volcanoes have thrown the whole world into turmoil.
What has happened is that it's made it difficult for them to have fresh water, it's made it difficult for them to farm, and now resources are scarce.
We're asking a lot of questions in it which are pertinent to our world as it is nowadays, and trying to inject that a little bit into the story.
As devastating as their advent was, the volcanoes unleashed an even greater force upon the people. Fear.
We're trying to reinvent fantasy on a certain level.
Lair is basically about a guy named Roan, who is a sky guard in the Assyrian army. It's sort of the story of his inner journey and outer journey as he fights against the evil in the world.
He's fighting a war that he doesn't necessarily want to fight.
Mount up, Roan! The Mokai are torching the city!
But he feels a sense of obligation of protecting his people, his city, from the other race. So he's sort of a reluctant warrior initially.
Two societies, two paths, one working with nature, the other conquering it.
Volcanoes have split the continent and split up the groups of people. There is now a upper-class aristocracy, the Assyrians, that have all the culture and all the know-how and all the beautiful buildings. And then there is a lower class, the Mokai, that live separate from them, that are more thought of as barbarians.
And the Assyrians move forward, taking nature and bending it to serve their will. So you'll see a lot of them using things like water wheels and dominating the environment, whereas the Mokai tried to involve nature in their culture more, and what ended up happening for them is that actually gave them a technological advantage.
I can't believe the range their catapults have. Who said the Mokai were primitive?
Kobakai is the young Hotspur of the Mokai. His father is one of the main generals. His father's missing an arm from all the horrible warfare that he suffered. And he is a tired soldier. He's tired of the fighting and he wants to end madness between the two countries.
It's a good morning for peace.
It is always a good morning for peace, General.
That's why you need so many soldiers.
Enough, Kobakai!
His son, who I play, Koba, is not so hip to this. He's not so trusting of the Assyrians.
The volcanoes that have been sent.
Roan is reasonably idealistic, and when the politics in the world start to take shape and the story unfolds, he'll find himself having to make some very difficult moral choices. And we're hoping that the player really comes along for the ride and experiences Roan's journey along with him.
We shouldn't be fighting!
The diviner prophesied the battle, so it is done!
When working on a next-generation title like Lair, the team at Factor 5 wanted the most realistic animations possible, so they turned to the motion capture experts at Sony Computer Entertainment.
Lair is a photorealistic world, and we want all of the animation and graphics to support that. Everything needs to be believable. And when you're dealing with the human characters, motion capture really is an excellent technology for getting that believable motion in a reasonable time frame at a reasonable cost.
Motion capture is the art of acquiring human motion via technology, and it's all based off of light. If your subject or your actor has a reflective marker on it, if one camera sees that marker, that shows up as a reflection in that camera. If then 3 cameras can agree on where it sees a reflection, it can then triangulate that marker in space.
Although motion capture has been around for a long time, one of the biggest improvements has to do with the quality of the performances.
This is my 3rd time doing motion capture. I've actually been doing martial arts since I was 13. I do a lot of action films, so they called me in for this because I have a lot of weapons experience also.
The hardest part as an actor doing motion capture is probably same as most actors when they're dealing with special effects, is you have to use your imagination because a lot of what we're dealing with is not actually there on set with us. Fight sequences are done in a way that is very surreal on set. Nothing really actually happens until it's all put together in the final game.
For Lair, the team used motion capture for many of the in-game cinematic scenes.
The scene that I was just doing, I was actually riding a dragon, and we're looking for water because I'm parched, I'm wounded, injured, Renkai, the other character who's played by Cindy, is fighting a spider monster.
I am playing Renkai, and I'm sort of the oracle. I'm the wise woman who convinces the hero to go and save the village.
I've never had to kill for a drink of water before.
You're more fortunate than many.
After that, we sat down next to a campfire and talked about how he was going to go on to save his people.
They murdered their families, destroyed their homes.
It's relatively easy to capture a single person doing things, but then when it gets to a crowd scene and you want to have that interacting with motion capture, it's a very complex process, but you get a level of emotional realism due to it, which beforehand and without motion capture is practically impossible to do.
You stay here, and then the camera will go to the captain.
For the bridge peace talk sequence that we did today, we spent the day before that actually choreographing how we wanted the death sequence to happen. Ely, the director, and I were working on how we'd want to use the striker to kill all three characters with the same weapon. The actors jumped in and helped out with some choreographing as well.
1, 2, Father! What are you doing?
The main reason I was counting is for the person who is in front of me, because my character whips this striker out, and a claw comes out of one end, connects with a chain, impales the person at the far end of the table, and then I wrap the chain around the person in front of me. And there's a blade at the other end, which I stab into the person who's coming this way. The problem was this person here in front of me had his back to me, so he couldn't really see what I was doing because obviously there was no chain around his neck. So I was counting it out, and on 3 was when I was wrapping the chain. 4, I was taking him this way. 5, I was taking him that way. I was also helping him with my hand on his back.
Once the performance is over, the job is far from complete.
There's quite a bit more that goes into it. Basically, you'll take all of your markers that we acquire, and then you have to do what's called tracking those. Since it is a light-based system, you get what's called occlusion. If you have 2 guys rolling around, that will occlude markers, and then those need to be rebuilt. And then you have to do a retarget, which then puts it back onto the actual asset that will be going into your game.
While motion capture is a highly technical art form, sometimes the team uses some simple aids to help in the process.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we used. We used a cart with a rolled up wrestling mat. Super high tech.
Father! This is the diviner's work, Roan. He will destroy us all.
The fate of the world is in your hands. To succeed, you must challenge all you know and seek a deeper truth. At your command is a living, breathing war machine that can set ablaze your enemies or devour them whole.
You are the hero as part of a Top Gun squadron of Dragon Riders who is protecting one of the 2 civilizations and is pretty much fighting in a war against the other civilization. So you've got lots of stuff going on in the air, on the ground, and it's very much comparable to the Top Gun nowadays, to guys in really fast jets.
The great thing about flying in Lair is that now we have the 6-axis controller on the PlayStation 3. In all of our previous games, we spent a lot of time tweaking the analog controllers and trying to make it feel natural. But now that we have a tilt sensor in the controller, we're able to give the player this really intuitive feedback loop where just by moving the controller, it's like pulling on the reins of the dragon and you just feel like you're in control.
We got the controller, it's great, new hardware. Everyone huddles around the desk and looks at it. So the first thing we did is just take the controller and use the tilt as a replacement for the joystick, left-right. You tilt left, you tilt right. And everyone tried it and it's like, this is crap, I don't want to play this. And so Julie and I sat down, we said, wait a minute, let us try a little bit and continually replace parts of the game to work with this new way of interacting with the game.
After the first day, where everybody was extremely skeptical, then people slowly started coming around and said, you know what, it actually controls better.
Well, the really nice thing about the controller is it matches the way you would think that a dragon would move. When a player tilts the controller down, they know what's going to happen. They know their dragon's going to descend. So in a lot of ways, it made it easier to maneuver and much more intuitive.
And as with everything, you must learn to master the beast until you fight as one.
We've now developed an obstacle course which allows players to just play around and experiment and see how the controller works and how it controls the dragon. With the joystick, you only have a certain amount of range. You have it centered, and then you have to try to figure out between the center position and full extreme position where exactly you wanted to turn, how sharp you wanted to turn. Very difficult when you're talking about a little tiny joystick.
On top of that, what we're using is a gesture recognition system. So if you do certain things which you would do when you hold the reins of a dragon, the game recognizes that and translates it without you having to press combinations of complicated buttons. It translates it into very easy movements. So for example, if you whip it up, then you do a 180 turn. If you slam your pad down, you dash forward with a dragon.
When you're on the ground, it's the same thing. You're in there, and just by jerking the controller to the right, the dragon will take his arms and he'll swipe at the enemy. It's very intuitive, and it's really fun.
Not all dragons are equal, and through many battles you will face multiple breeds.
There are several different dragon species in Lair, and they come from different regions. The player, as Roan, is riding on what we call the Plains Dragon. Easy go. And this is sort of a middle-of-the-road dragon, but even that is big and powerful. He's sort of like an SUV with wings and tail and teeth.
We have very light and weak dragons, like an ice dragon, for example. This kind of dragon, it's really simple to usually defeat him. Oftentimes it might just be a ranged fireball or a flame breath against him. We also have the much stronger, heavier dragons, like a dark dragon, for example, and that's the kind of dragon that you really need to beat him up quite a bit to defeat him.
Your fire isn't enough! You have to go in for the kill!
Obviously doesn't want you to attack him. He's trying to be evasive. He's doing evasive maneuvers. Within that melee mode, he's also trying to block your moves and try to get out of that so that he can attack you. The other things you can do is you can use your environments to your advantage. If you know enemies are chasing you and you're outnumbered, it'd be a good idea to fly down by friendly troops and use your own troops to actually attack enemy dragons.
The combat in Lair is designed to get you closer and closer and closer to your target. First thing you do is you pick out who you want to attack, and there's a simple intuitive mechanism by which you can get the camera to focus on your enemy, and by shaking the controller down you can get your dragon to dash right towards your enemy.
We're calling it the pursuit bubble, and it's a bubble in the sense that you are in close range, flying still through the air with the other dragon, and you can start by actually using the physicality of the controller. You can slam into the other guy. He evades you, and you kind of do this ballet-like fight in the air, flying next to each other. Then the next step is, once you've rammed often enough into him, both of you actually tumble out of the sky or start basically falling down, while they duke it out, really with their claws and in a very inhuman and very nasty, beastly fighting game.
Killing a dragon is no easy task. To do so, you must summon all your strength to bring the beast down.
There's times in Lair when, if you're really powerful, you can do special moves, and the knight gets much more involved in the combat here. Here he takes what we call a striker, and he can use that and cast it out like a whip. He can latch onto another dragon and yank himself over there, and he'll kill the other dragon's rider.
So he dies, and then you finally go up to the dragon, stab him into the eye, and you jump back, fly through the air. Your own dragon, who's been watching the whole thing, is swooping in and catches you at the last moment before you would actually splat onto the ground. And that's just one of the killing moves.
When rendering the soundscape for a world where evolution has taken a turn, where instead of lions roaming the plains, you have dragons flying the skies, believability is key.
People who follow Factor 5's work know that audio is one of our key focuses. If we're going to have these realistic-looking dragons that move realistically, the sound is just as important in terms of selling them as believable creatures.
So the team set out on an expedition to the San Francisco Zoo to record the sounds of all types of animals.
Of course, we're recording the bears and every large creature, but what's surprising really, if you go to the zoo and you listen in, we are actually recording real animals, which you wouldn't think of in sound terms at all.
According to the zookeepers, one of the shyest creatures at the zoo also makes the most unusual noises.
So for the koala bears, we were actually in the cages. We didn't get anything for a while. I think they were a bit nervous. And it was when we were leaving when they finally decided to start making noise.
But while the zoo is full of exotic animals, don't expect to see them in the game.
The fantastic creatures are based on real-world animals in many cases. So we, for example, have a pretty giant rhino-based creature. But of course, in terms of sound, we want to base it on elephants, rhinos, going into that direction. The PS3 is able to do sound the way movies have been doing it for the last couple of years, so we need to use the same techniques. A sound library always tries to go middle ground, and you don't want middle ground, especially not when you're talking about a massive giant which is smashing through the world. So when you're creating a movie, you go out and record individual sounds for that movie, and that's exactly what we're doing here for the game.
The coolest sound we got today probably was the hippo in the beginning when he was coming out of the water and doing this weird noise.
That was great.
Yeah.
Afterwards, they started feeding them apples and a little bit of everything actually, and they were enjoying that quite a bit and chomping down on that, so got some good sounds doing that too.
While the animals were usually kept safely behind bars, the sound team always had to be careful not to get too close.
Having the lions lunge at me was by far the most exciting thing. I've never been about 10 feet in front of a lion while it's just jumping right at me, so that was really exciting.
And on occasion, the zookeepers led the team into locations strictly off limits to the general public.
Hi, we're gonna go in here and you're gonna see the bears up close, and there's bars, and I want you to stay well away from the bars because if you stick any equipment or fingers, they will be gone.
The polar bears were pretty exciting. I mean, all these animals, the big ones, just have this incredible low frequency to them that you just don't hear with any other type of animal.
Okay guys, that's a wrap, let's go.
Hey, wait a second. Come back.
And since the San Francisco Zoo didn't have any dragons to record, ultimately, the team had to improvise.
A dragon sound, obviously, is like nothing you've heard before. But then on the other hand, you want it to be real and coming out of nature. So what you take is you take a lion sound, and then that might be your bass line. Then maybe under it, you mix in a really, really low rumble from an elephant. And then on top of it, maybe an elephant scream.
One of the things that's really funny is that the biggest, loudest part of one of our dragon roars is actually a robin pitched way down low and slowed down, and it becomes this fearsome element in the creature's voice.
All of that really blends together. To the human ear, you subconsciously get this feeling this is a real sound, but you cannot really pinpoint it. And that's really the trick with sound design.
It's not funny. Come on.
The power and beauty of the cinematics in Lair rival even the biggest budget Hollywood special effects, propelling the story forward, deepening the characters, and giving us insight to the world. But as with any movie, stunning visuals are only half of the equation. That's where the Foley Artist comes in.
Since the divide, my people have known nothing but war.
Foley is really the recreation of sounds in sync with the picture. That is, imagine being in a movie theater, taking all the seats out and having all these different surfaces and props, and we're actually creating sounds in sync with the picture.
Captain Talon! Rome, Devin, Loden, get to the stable!
You know what? I didn't quite make it from Runaway, so can you pick it up there? Today we get a chance to do the stables, when the big dragons come out from behind the barred area where they're kept. They have big, big footstep sounds as they come out and Allison, what do you think about the dragon feet, though?
I think it should be nailed. Lots of nails and...
Typically when we approach a scene, what we'll do is we will look at it first, then we'll just do the footsteps first. That gives us a chance to really see what's going on and get a feel for everything sonically. You know, let me try the run out again, that was wrong. Then we'll do the dragon footsteps, which of course we get a chance then to balance, if you will, between the human footsteps, which would only be so big, and the huge dragon feet. And in fact, even sweeten, that is, add additionally the sound of the nails of the dragons, because you clearly see them, at least in one of them, as they're coming towards us. And then from that point, we'll do props, and generally we do foreground to midground to background. Good. The dragon wings, we're using a large cape we bought for a couple other films we had to use recently. Yeah, I think, Justin, what we'll do is, since they're coming from the BG to the foreground, just Al's going to do it by herself. So Allison and I, we will use it in such a way that we create this big flapping sound. So, I mean, we really feel like that when we hear that flap, you think that this creature is literally held up in the air by its wings.
Good tools are key to any profession, but to a Foley artist, tools are everything.
Any good Foley stage looks like a garage sale gone berserk. The reason for that is there's so many different things we might need to use for a film or a video game or whatever it is that we're working on. Of course, the first thing we use is shoes. I probably have about 80 to 90 pair of shoes, each with unique properties. And yes, it's true, I do have a beautiful pair of red high heels, which only come out on certain occasions. We also need an incredible amount of props. I'd say we probably have somewhere around the neighborhood of 5,000 different props here on the stage. I'll give you a little less blood spurt. Could be something as large as a hood of a trunk, or it could be swords, could be arrows, could be pretty much anything. And again, this whole collection allows us to create any sound, custom sound for the project we're working on. When we do that right, you, the audience, don't know we've done it, you just believe what you're hearing.
The PlayStation 3 is by far the most advanced gaming system ever created, and even a seasoned developer like Factor 5 needs to learn new methods and new tricks to unlock its power.
One of the biggest challenges making photorealistic next-generation games on PlayStation 3 is that we are at a level of quality now where we compare with movies and television and special effects, but we don't get to use some of their tricks.
When you're creating a movie, the director can say, I want exactly this shot. I'm going to frame it this way. And you can work with that because you know, oh, the back of the head you will never see because it is not in the shot. So you can only build the face. We don't have that luxury. In games, the user has the control over the camera. You can always look around, and if there is no back of the head, it falls apart. So not only have we reached the detail level of movies and the rendering capabilities of movies, but in terms of production value, we have to deliver more than the movie guys ever had to do.
And what makes this possible is Sony's cell technology.
If you look at your household PC, it basically is one unit that does all the processing in there. There's one thing that does, okay, 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 3 is 5. There's only that fast that it can go though. And the big difference for Cell is that there's a massive group of other CPUs that really can work massively in parallel.
The trick is, of course, to break up the game into small tasks that you can assign to these processors, and then they work independently for the rest of the game. And once they're done calculating, they report back, and you can take those results and send them to other cells.
Early on in the process, Factor 5 discovered a unique way to use the cell technology to their advantage, called progressive mesh.
A lot of people ask us, how many polygons in your Dragon? And the weird thing about that is, with the technology we're using on Cell, on any given frame of the game, I can't answer that question. We're building assets that are movie quality. We take them to the millions of polygons. We're running algorithms that decide how many polygons any given object on the screen should be using based on how far it is from the camera, how big it is on the screen.
We're being ambushed! Protect the mantis!
So in the past we had to create distinct LODs. So LODs means if you're a certain distance from an object, it maybe has 100 polygons. If you get closer, maybe it has 200. If you get closer, 400, and so on. But an artist had to actually go in and create each one of these LODs by hand. And when you switch between the LODs, you often saw like a pop, and all of a sudden it had more detail. So progressive mesh allows us to continuously add polygons as you get closer and closer to the object. So you don't have that jarring pop moment anymore.
So it gives you basically a smooth migration from one level to the next. If you look at it, you basically don't notice it happening. So it's a very nice, a very soft look. And again, the great power of the cell processor actually allows us to do that.
Once the cell processors have calculated the polygons, it hands the job off to another chip to put on the finishing touches.
The RSX is the graphical part of the machine. Cell is really good at doing simulations. It is not particularly specialized to render a lot of little pixels from which the whole image is built. The RSX chip is specifically designed to do just that, taking it the final step and giving you the photorealistic finish on everything.
One of the things Factor 5 has a reputation for is very cutting-edge rendering engines. We did some really great things with atmospheric effects in the last generation, and we're taking that to the next level on PlayStation 3. All of our light is real-time. The sun rises, the sun sets, the fog rolls in, the fog rolls out, the shadows are generated in real time. Everything is dynamic. Every time a dragon breathes fire, it's casting a light on some part of the world around where that flame is, and there's a lot of fire.
The power of Sony's cell processor allows programmers to create truly immersive gameplay that was unimaginable on other consoles.
The best proof of what Cell and the PS3 really can do is probably that you've got dozens of dragons, sometimes hundreds of dragons flying in the air, and you've got this complete air battle, and usually that would be about it. Now with the PS3, the crazy thing is we can at the same time have a complete real-time strategy battle with thousands of troops on the ground going on.
Just like in a real battle, decisions are being made on all levels, but that does not mean one person can't affect the outcome.
Down to the bridge and torch the enemy troops!
The armies are fighting independent of you. The tide of battle is swaying independent of you. You can then go down and influence the tide of the battle, which is one of the key things to do, but they're shooting catapults at each other, the archers are fighting, the swordsmen are fighting against each other.
There's literally 20,000 troops on the ground fighting it out. You're just one guy on one dragon, but what you do can turn the tide of battle. So at the top of the screen you'll see a little meter, and that's your morale meter. When the player does actions that help his side's cause, his troops will get energized, and that meter will go up, and it will help you understand who's winning the battle.
Keep up the assault!
Your job is to figure out which things you want to affect, which aerial battles you want to become involved in, and which ground combats you want to become involved in.
So at crucial moments when you see that the morale actually drops, then you have to come up with ways to boost it again. Take out lots of dragons in one swoop, go down and actually kill the front line of the enemy's group.
Turn the tide!
Basically do gruesome things to the enemy which would boost the morale of your troops, and in general just figure out how that whole strategy works out from your perspective as just one guy in this huge battle.
But in the end, even the most powerful tools are not enough. You need a creative, talented, and dedicated team to make the game truly great.
We've been pursuing kind of this gameplay for a while now. It went from you're in a world and there's 10 other objects in the world and you do something with those 10 objects. Then it went to you're supposed to be part of an army and do something with the army, but the army really was more of a backdrop. And this time around, I think we really got to a point where you're doing something and your actions influence the outcome of a big battle, for example. So it's not just something that's happening in the background, it's also something that you are a part of.
it's really pretty limitless. We're doing all of these AI features for hundreds and thousands of objects, and at the same time still have enough CPU power left that we can simulate water, physics, many things in real time.
So the thing about working on PlayStation 3 is that you have this immense amount of power. The longer you work on it, the more you can get out of it. At some point you have to finish your game. What we ended up doing, I think, was just about 90% of what we wanted to do in the end. We've been working on the hardware now since the first kits arrived, and we don't think we've even gotten to 50% of what this thing can do. We're very excited about the future.
When creating the music for Lair, an epic game where dragons fill the skies and scorch the earth, the development team knew they needed a composer who could capture the essence of the game with a dynamic score.
Our composer on this title was John Debney, and he was fantastic to work with. He's well known for his movie scores.
Let's take everything up one dynamic in the strings only.
He did Sin City and Passion of the Christ, and we were just really excited to work with him.
Well, I was first approached by my agent. He asked me, have you ever considered doing a video game? And I said, I'd love to do one. Tell me about it.
Lair setting is a world in chaos, and you are part of a Top Gun squadron of dragon riders.
It was so inspiring to me personally, writing the music to this game. Truly, the story inspired me, the visuals inspired me, the conceptual art was just brilliant. It was great. This world is so unique, and yet it's not so foreign that we can't feel the same emotions that the characters are feeling.
There hasn't been bloodshed like this for centuries. Some of them had never even seen battle.
But unlike many game soundtracks, the team wanted the music to not just play in the background, but to help tell the story.
We wanted to have more of an operatic approach to the score itself, so it's more of an overarching music composition where we have a beginning, a middle, and end.
Act 1 is more Assyrian, it's sort of high civilization. Act 2, then, we move into the Mokai, so it becomes a little more ethnic in nature. Act 3, we have a blending of the two things, of the high culture of the Assyrians and the very earthy feeling of the Mokai.
So we have the music that mirrors the story. It just brings a whole new level to the experience that we're giving to the player.
After months of hard work, the team came to London to record some of the greatest musicians in the world at the famed Abbey Road Studios.
Today we recorded a 75-piece band, pretty much the full array of everything that you could ask for.
I've had many directors that ask me, well, why do we need to go to a scoring stage? And I said, well, you'll find out.
John sends us mock-ups in synth format of different vocalists, different instruments.
The synth tracks are like a black and white snapshot of what the color photograph will be. And the great thing is when you're working with a creative team that maybe haven't experienced the energy and power of the live orchestra. And to see their faces, literally it's just sort of an epiphany of, oh my gosh.
You get this full sound that you just can't get anywhere else, and it's just been an amazing experience recording here.
A human being, whether they're playing a violin or they're playing a trumpet, they are using both their emotion and their technique. Synthesizers, it's all digital. So while I think that synthesized sounds are getting better and better, there's still a human element. And I would bemoan the day that we're all just creating things in a box, because this is the magic.